Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to our /EntitledPeople, where people truly think it's all about them and who cares about anyone else, right? And in today's episode, we've got another wild one. Karen's throwing tantrums in parking lots, attacking school principals, destroying weddings. Oh my goodness. So yeah, sit back, relax, and seriously, try not to shake your heads too hard today. Let's dive in. I recently had one of those days where you just think, wow, people really suck sometimes. This took place in the parking lot of the grocery store I frequent. I was parked, getting out of my car when the wind blows my door open gently. And seriously, it barely touched the car next to mine. There was no visible dent, just a small scuff mark. The important thing is I immediately acknowledged it and I offered to exchange information. Well, this woman loses her mind. When I explained it was the wind, not to avoid responsibility, but just to clarify that it wasn't a careless act, she cuts me off and she says, no. Something like this happened before and it cost me well over $2,000. My car is new. How are you going to pay for this? At that point, it felt less like she was assessing real damage and more like she was trying to guilt trip and manipulate me. The woman even pointed out a completely unrelated mark further down, and she insisted that was from my door too, which made no sense based on where the door touched. And it escalated fast. The woman starts screaming at me that her husband's a lawyer, that she'd sue me for thousands of dollars. She even started filming me and my toddler, who was crying in the car seat, scared and confused. And if that wasn't bad enough, she threatened to call the cops unless I handed her $2,000 cash right now. The whole time, I was trying to stay calm, juggle my phone, pull up my insurance app, and soothe my child. And the woman just kept the camera on us, the whole time screaming that I'd better give her money. I could feel my son's distress behind me, and that's when I lost it emotionally and I called 911 myself. I didn't feel safe or respected, and I needed a neutral record of what was happening. I told her that we'd settle this through insurance and gave her my information. I went back to the car to comfort my son, who was by then screaming and crying from the stress. I look up and the woman was still filming us. I was literally trying to calm my scared toddler and she kept her phone pointed at us like we were some kind of show. And it didn't stop there. When I showed her that I'd called 911, the woman screamed and she called police herself. She told the police that I banged on her window, which was absolutely false. She then starts screaming out loud and she accused me of locking my child in the car with no air circulation, which was also far from the truth. It was just another accusation meant to make me panic. I know she probably assumed that she could intimidate me because I look like someone who might not push back, but I didn't back down. My husband showed up when I called him, and for the first time in the whole interaction, I felt not alone. I still felt the stress hours later, but I am proud of how I handled it. I didn't yell, I didn't film her back, I didn't escalate. I protected my son and kept my dignity. Yeah, in my opinion, not only was that Karen a bit psycho, but clearly she was trying a quick money grab there. Like, come on, pointing out damage that's unrelated and then demanding a specific amount of cash, like that's an immediate red flag. And for those who are curious, OP does mention in the comments that police showed up. And Karen did throw a fit as they couldn't do anything about OP, aka jailing OP for not giving in to her wild demands. Why am I not surprised? So this happened a few days ago and I'm still so pissed. It's also a long post. My husband and I had our wedding on the anniversary of the day we met. Everything was set up to be perfect, etc., etc. As part of our guest list, we did invite work colleagues, with everyone getting a +1. One of my coworkers, who we'll call John, let me know a few weeks ago that he was going to bring his new girlfriend to the wedding. It was a bit last minute, but as one of our other guests had recently canceled, I figured it would be fine. It turned out to be a big mistake. At our reception, our wedding favors were cupcakes in a little box with a handwritten thank you note. As they were the wedding favors, there was one at each place setting, and therefore one for each person. Next to the head table, we also had a smaller table, where we had our wine close by and a Ferris wheel cupcake holder, filled with enough cupcakes for us to have one each, as the bridesmaids and groomsmen also got additional favors. And here's where things go downhill. The first course hadn't even started before a woman holding a toddler and being followed by a young child, none of which I'd ever seen, marches up to the head table. The son was about 5 years old, and the woman says, "Excuse me." She's wearing a black top and a skirt. And as the service staff's uniform is just black attire, I straight away presume that she was a waiter or something, trying to find the kid's parents. So I reply, "Hi, yes?" She then says, "Just so you know, there aren't enough cupcakes." I'm obviously taken aback by this, and I reply, "I'm sorry, what?" She then repeats herself, and she says, "I said there aren't enough cupcakes." I ask, "What do you mean?" She then goes on and says, "You're 2 cupcakes short. My kids don't have any. You're the bride, so do something about this." At this point, I'm mortified, thinking that me and my husband had somehow miscounted, or we messed up ordering the cupcakes. But I'm also embarrassed because this woman's face is not ringing any bells, and I feel like an a-hole for not knowing who one of our guests are. I just tell the woman, "I'm so sorry about that. Are your kids part of the +1s? We might not have put a favor on the table if we didn't know your kids' names." She then says, "I'm the +1. I've got my cupcake, but you don't have enough for my kids to have theirs." Right about now, I'm very confused. I say, "You're the +1? She then looks at me like I'm slow, and she says, "Yes, I'm the +1. I then ask, "Are your kids +1s for someone else?" She says, "No, they're my +1s. And hearing that, I'm thinking in my head that this woman, who happens to be someone's +1, also brought along 2 +1s, and now she's complaining there isn't enough cupcakes. I'm trying to think of a response, but she just goes on and says, very sarcastically, "Well, obviously, they're only little kids. I can't exactly leave them at home, can I?" I just tell her, "Oh, we only had enough cupcakes for 1 +1. She then says, "But my kids would like a cupcake. Don't you have any extras in the back kitchen or something?" Right about now, the older child has spotted the cupcakes for the head table, and he's starting to walk towards it, and my husband's noticed this almost immediately. He gets up to cut the child off. Meanwhile, Karen's looking at me and not her child, and she says to me, "Surely you have some extra cupcakes for my kids." I tell her we did, but only for the kids we knew were coming, miss. She then says, "Well, why didn't you know my kids were coming?" And I'm just utterly flabbergasted by this question. I respond, "We weren't told about your kids, miss." Karen then has the nerve to lose it on me, and she says, "Well, then you should have had spare cupcakes. What kind of planning did you do where you don't even think about having a few extra cupcakes?" I just start to apologize, but then I'm cut off by the older child shrieking. I look back over, and my husband's picked up the boy, who has one corner of the tablecloth clenched in his little hand. Thankfully, he hadn't pulled the kid away very far, so only one bottle of wine was knocked over by the kid pulling it. And that's when Karen shrieks and says, "Why are you touching my son?" My husband tells her he was pulling on the table. He was going to pull everything off of it. I quickly rushed to my feet, and one of the groomsmen who had been standing nearby also rushed over to help. Karen then puts her toddler down, and she also rushes over. She's screaming, "Put down my child right now. What the F are you doing picking up someone else's kid?" She then spots our cupcake stand that was teetering dangerously with all the tablecloth pulling, and she says, "See, he only wanted a cupcake. Can we just have 2 of these and we'll go?" I let her know that those are for the head table. They're our cupcakes. and at this point, it's pure chaos. The groomsman's trying to pry the kid's fingers off the tablecloth as my husband's trying to keep things from falling off the table. I pull this Karen aside as to not cause a bigger scene, and she ends up yelling at me saying, "He's just a child. What else is he meant to do when he's not given a cupcake?" I tell her not take things that aren't his. This woman's relentless though, and she won't let it go. She keeps telling me to give her son a cupcake to shut him up and that I'm being selfish. She gets so riled up that at this point, me, my husband, my maid of honor, and a couple of employees were crowding around the table. All the while, her kid's wailing at the top of his lungs for a cupcake. People who weren't even in the room at the time had come rushing in to see what the fuss is about. Meanwhile, Karen's screaming and jabbing a finger at me saying, if you just let him have a damn cupcake, he would stop screaming. I was so mad at this point that I just screamed back at her and I said, why can't you control your effing child, you effing crack addict? The groomsman finally managed to get the kid to let go of the tablecloth, and my husband hoists him up and away from the table quickly as the kid just thrashes more violently. Karen rushes over to my husband, pulling on his arms, attempting to pull her son loose. The groomsmen pull her off of my husband and continue to restrain her, as now she begins to scream. She's screaming, "Let go of me, I'll have you all effing arrested. This is assault." Suddenly, I'm very overwhelmed as the adrenaline wears off. I walk over to my maid of honor to try to help her fix the table. A few more bottles had tipped over and rolled off the table, but thankfully none had broken. But it doesn't end there. While Karen and her kid are screaming threats and are in hysterics, my husband was shouting over them for someone to call security. And that's when we hear someone from the other end of the room shout, "Someone get the baby." I turn around to try to find out what's happening with the baby, and I watch as the tablecloth from the head table and all of the plates and decorations get pulled off and hit the floor with a terrible crash and shatter. Immediately, Karen pushes the groomsman off of her and she rushes to the mess on the floor. The toddler's now screaming as Karen tries to pull the kid out from under the tablecloth. Everyone else in the room's silent and I'm in shock. And then suddenly, I can't handle it anymore and I start bawling my eyes out. Karen manages to pull her kid out from under the tablecloth. And if that wasn't bad enough, she then starts shouting loudly, saying it's my fault, that her kid could have been seriously hurt. I can't respond, so I start crying even more. This is when people start chiming in and telling her not to yell, as this was all her fault this happened because she can't control her effing kids. She then had the audacity to say, "Don't you guys talk to me like that. This wouldn't have happened if you had just had enough cupcakes for everyone." My maid of honor tells her we did have enough for everyone. You and your kids weren't invited to this wedding. Around this point, venue security finally show up, and Karen starts again talking about how he only wanted a cupcake. The two groomsmen talk to the guards as my husband and my maid of honor try and get me to stop crying. The groomsmen explain the situation to the security guards, and Karen and her kids were escorted out, but not before she makes an even bigger scene, shouting at the guards saying, "They tried to hurt my baby. That's what they get." I don't know if the police were called, and I don't know if the venue pressed charges or not. I just kind of sat there and cried while surrounded by the mess of my reception. The staff were really lovely, and they helped me reset the head table with new plates and glasses. The guests who weren't in the room soon came in to see the leftovers of the mess, and a few even apologized for not being there when it happened. The rest of the night was nice and what I was hoping for, but to me, the day was ruined. The tension after that kind of incident doesn't just disappear. I didn't see my coworker John for the rest of the night, and I only know that Karen was his +1 because some of my other colleagues informed me that she had been sitting at their table with him and she had been bitching about the cupcake situation long before me and my husband even entered the room. That's basically the story of how a coworker's +1 ruined my wedding. Guys, that post was wildly chaotic, and I do feel so bad for OP. Like, I know how much work and planning wedding and money goes into a wedding. And to have a self-entitled woman ruin a special day in one short moment, all because her kids who weren't invited didn't get cupcakes, is wild. And Opie does come back, and they say, also, I don't plan to bill Karen for the damages. Yes, she was awful, and yes, her kids and her behavior made me pissed beyond belief. But the venue didn't charge me for their broken plates or the drama my wedding caused. And the only things of mine that were broken was the cupcake stand, that most likely I wouldn't have kept anyways. It seemed needlessly petty on my part. So my sister and I were talking about the things that happened in our childhoods last night over FaceTime, and my mom, who happened to be cleaning something nearby, yelled over to us and she said, "Do you remember what happened to Mrs. A?" That got me thinking, and I said, "Oh mother, I do remember exactly what happened to Mrs. A." So here's my story. All of the names are made up. To set the scene for you a bit, I was in primary school, maybe about 9 or 10 when this happened, and it happened well over 15 years ago now. I was a pretty strange child, and I got into a fair deal of trouble. I'm actually autistic, but I went undiagnosed until I was about 14 years old, so a lot of what I was doing was written off as bad behavior, as opposed to normal behavior for an autistic child. My primary school, however, did have a special unit for special needs children, most of whom had autism that was more severe than mine is. With that said, there was this one boy who we'll call James. Now, James was a terror student. He used to hit and bite and chase other children. He used to chase us with his water bottle after school and soak us with water, which was particularly bad, as our school uniform had a white shirt. James thought it was hilarious to pick on girls specifically because of this, and as anyone who's worn white fabric in the rain will tell you, this is not good. I lived just outside my primary school, so I was allowed to walk home from the age of 7 or so, because my mom could see me out the window. She would often get into loud shouting arguments with James's mom, the entitled Karen of our story, when James did this to me. Now, James's mom was hella entitled. She thought that just because he had Asperger's, he was allowed to do anything, that he was doing nothing wrong, and that he was just a boy being a boy. I remember very vividly her screaming in my face one day when I defended myself against him and screamed at him. Her response was her saying, "How dare you bully a disabled boy? My son is special needs, and it's only water. There's nothing wrong." Eventually, there came a day where I'd had enough. I was walking home, drinking one of those dinky cartons of chocolate milk you get at school. I think I had it left over from lunch. That's when James runs up to me, and delighted, he begins soaking me and my friend, Simone. She of course tells him to get lost, but obviously that didn't work. He then turned to me, and I hit him first. Not with my fist, but with my milk. I squirted that carton all over him. I got it on his face and his hair and all over his bright blue coat he was wearing. This of course causes him to scream and start flapping in panic. His mom runs over to us screaming, while my mom is screaming from our window, and Simone and I both bolt. I run inside my house as fast as I could, but it wasn't long before James's mom turns up at the door, shrieking at my mom. I mostly hid during all of this, but the general back and forth was Karen screaming at my mom saying, "Your child is a devil child. She's picking on a disabled boy." My mom just tells her, "We've told you not to let him do that before. He shouldn't be splashing girls like that or he'll turn into a perv." At that, Karen says, "How dare you? He's a disabled boy. How do you have no compassion for him?" Eventually she left, declaring loudly that she was going to the school right now to speak to Mrs. A and get me expelled. Mrs. A was our head principal. She was a young, nice lady who I'd always thought was stern but nice. This really upset me because what if I did get expelled from primary school? We got a call the next day from Mrs. A asking if my mom could come in the following afternoon to speak with her about me, and I didn't need to come into school until we'd all spoken. I felt the worst. My mom had to miss half a day of work, and my dad was livid. I felt so embarrassed, and I was sure I was in a world of trouble. To my surprise, I was in no trouble whatsoever. I was in Mrs. A's office for less than 5 minutes. She just told me not to do it again. However, I did notice that Mrs. A had a very swollen eye. My mother filled me in on the rest after I left. Apparently, Mrs. A thought it was the funniest thing she'd ever heard, and she started laughing her head off. After James's mom stormed off from our door to go talk to her, she apparently barges into the school and into Mrs. A's office, mid-meeting with other teaching staff. She starts screaming while dragging her milk-covered son, trailing it everywhere behind her. Now, I never got told how it went down exactly, but the gist was, after Mrs. A refused to expel me, as she felt it was unfair to punish a child who was defending themselves from repeated harassment, James's mom then punched her in the face in her own office in front of the staff. The janitor, a big burly man, escorts her out, and she had been banned from the school grounds. Mrs. A then told my mom if this was a normal situation, I would have to tell both children off, as neither behavior is acceptable. But in light of what happened yesterday, I'm more inclined to find that what your daughter did was rather funny. Shortly after that, James transferred schools. I never heard from him or his crazy mom ever again. I still think it's crazy that she thought she could attack the head teacher. I don't blame James for any of it. He was only a kid, and one who had social problems defining boundaries anyways because of his Asperger's. Having a crazy mom probably didn't help him, and I hope as he got older, he found friends and he stopped splashing people with bottled water. Guys, I've said this so many times before, like the audacity of self-entitled people never ceases to amaze me. Oh, you refuse to punish someone who I think should be punished? Well, Mrs. Principal, how about I hit you in the face to teach you a lesson? Like maybe she's the reason that James found it fun to torment students at his school. And this person shares a short post where a similar situation happened. This person writes, I work at a middle school. This school is predominantly African American and Latino. I work the front desk. The day this happened, there were 2 boys that were walking and laughing through the front doors. One came into the office to give me a note from his teacher, and then, as they were walking out, the other kid literally turns and punches the kid in the face. I was so shocked, and then, to make matters worse, the kid went to do it again. He then shouts, he hit me in the face first. He said that to a teacher that was yelling at him to stop, and I'm thinking, no, he didn't. I finally snapped into reality, and I went to separate the situation while my partner at the desk called for the principal. I was the only one who saw everything happen, so I was the witness. Both the parents were called, and Punchy Boy's mom came to the school. She told the principal that she wanted to talk to the one who saw everything, and that she wasn't leaving until they do. The principal asked if I was comfortable with that, and I agreed. Well, the mom then accused me of being racist towards her son because he was African American, and that the other boy hit him first. Now, there were cameras, so I was confused what game she thought she was playing. She said, and I quote, "Oh, a violent situation happens, look what the white person thinks." She then went and told the principal how they need to hire non-racist people, even going as far as demanding my job because of what I reported. The principal looks at me apologetically as the mom continues to scream at me, saying I'm racist. He then walks to the computer to pull up the camera footage. The mom sits there with a slack jaw as she sees her son go from laughing to randomly just hitting the boy in the face. With no apology, she walks out of the school with her son. And to this day, she still doesn't give me eye contact when she comes into the school. My principal thought that I handled myself gracefully though, so I guess it was okay. I'm a 30-year-old female, and I'm the mother of a beautiful little girl who's 7 years old. When my daughter was about 1, I discovered that her father had been cheating on me. We end up separating, and he fled the state to avoid paying child support. No one in our social circle has heard from him ever since. Even though the whole situation was devastating, I have an amazing family that's been there for me every step of the way. Since my ex-boyfriend was the sole breadwinner and he fled without any warning, I had to start providing for me and my daughter. Luckily, my parents let me and my daughter stay with them rent-free until I could get back on my feet. My parents are very rich, so I do understand that I had a lot of privileges that most mothers in my position don't have. For the past 4 years, my daughter and I have been happily living together in an apartment. I work full-time as a nurse, so here's the issue. I have a Facebook profile where I've posted several pictures of me and my daughter. I also describe myself as a happy and devoted single mom. Now, I honestly never thought that there was anything wrong or misleading with this description. I am a single mother and I have been for several years. Well, one of my new coworkers, who's also a single mother, took great offense to my Facebook profile. She texted me a couple of days ago and she started losing it on me. She said that I had no right to claim that I'm a single mom, as I've never had to deal with hardships that came along with the title. I was really confused and pissed as this came out of nowhere. I explained that I'm a single mother and she has no idea what I've gone through over the years. She snapped back and she asked, "Have you ever had to sacrifice a meal so your child could eat?" No. Have you ever had to beg and panhandle for measly sums of change to buy diapers? No. Have you ever had to rely on government assistance only to walk away with some measly food stamps? No. Have you ever cried yourself to sleep night after night, terrified that your lights were gonna be shut off? No. None of that ever happened to you because you had mommy and daddy's money to bail you out. You don't know what being a single mother is really like, so quit effing acting like you do. Remove single mother off your Facebook profile. I was really shaken up by what my coworker said, but I just argued and I said that is in fact what I am. I'm single and a mother, so that's what I have on my profile. She again demanded that I remove it as I don't have the right to call myself one. I still don't think calling myself a single mom is inappropriate in any way, but now I'm not so sure. Am I the a-hole in this situation? Listen, I personally don't think that OP's the a-hole at all because, as they've said, by definition, they are a single mother. Like, just because someone happens to be in a different socioeconomic status or has support doesn't make them any less of a single mom. Like, I'm not sure why OP's coworker thinks the only way you can be a single parent is if you suffer, thus allowing you the right to call yourself one. And the top comment on this post, guys, with over 11,000 upvotes says, "You are not the a-hole. The term single mother isn't reserved for people who suffered the most. It's reserved for people who are mothers and don't have a significant other involved. Your coworker sounds like she's coped with hardship by investing her identity and self-worth into struggle. So when other people threaten her definition, they're threatening her self-worth. We all have different struggles, and some of us have them harder and some have them easier, and we swap places over time. Empathy is a blanket, not a sieve." Guys, let me know your thoughts on this. In my opinion, wanting OP to get rid of single mother off her Facebook profile, all because it doesn't fit what she thinks a single mother should be, is super entitled. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our /entitled people. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up, and if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/I don't work here lady, where a creepy Karen follows OP, and it's such a big mistake. Guys, go check it out if you haven't, and myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.